This latter officer, his name was Smith, used. Eureka! He was tall and thin. Incidentally, he was also surly. But the winning ways of the jovial master plumber, who was so free with his money, ultimately thawed him. Every night throughout the rest of the week I spent in this constable's company, studying his somewhat colorless personality. Then one afternoon I entered the museum. My weedy beard, my gaunt expression, my hollow cough, they were all in the part. I went up to the Egyptian room to assure myself that a certain mummy case had not been removed, and having found it to occupy its usual place, I descended to the Etruscan basement. For half an hour I occupied myself there, but the commissionaire never budged from his seat. I knew that this particular man was only in temporary charge, whilst another was at tea, for I was well posted, and wondered if his companion were ever coming back. Luckily, an incident occurred to serve my purpose. The chief attendant appeared at the head of the steps. "Robbins," he called. Robbins ran briskly upstairs at his command, and then, in 15 seconds, my transformation was complete. Gone were the weedy gray beard and mustache. Gone the seedy black garments and the elastic-sided boots. Gone the old opera hat, and behold, I was Constable Smith, attired in mummy wrappings. An acrobatic spring, and the bundle of aged garments was wedged behind a tall statue where nothing but a most minute search could reveal it. Down again, not a second to spare. Into the empty sarcophagus at the further end of the room, and lastly, a hideous rubber mask slipped over the ruddy features of Constable Smith and attached behind the ears. My arms stiffened, and my hands concealed in the wrappings, and I was a long dead mummy, with a neat leather case hidden beneath my arched back. Brisk work, I assure you, but one grows accustomed to it in time. The commissionaire entered the room very shortly afterwards. He had not seen me go out, but, as I expected, neither was he absolutely sure I had not done so. He peered about suspiciously, but I did not mind. The real ordeal came a couple of hours later, when a police officer flashed his lantern into all the tombs. For a moment my heart seemed to cease beating as the light shone on my rubber countenance, but he was satisfied, this stupid policeman, and I heard his footsteps retreating to the door. I allowed him time to get to the top and extinguish the light in the Etruscan room, and then I was out of my tomb and hidden in the little niche immediately beside the foot of the stairs. I coughed loudly. Heavens! He came back down the steps with such velocity he was carried halfway along the room. He began to flash his lantern into the tombs again, but before he had examined the first of them I was upstairs in the Roman gallery. Without the electric light it was quite dark in the Etruscan room, which is in the basement, but being a bright night I knew I could find what I required in the Roman gallery without the aid of artificial light. Besides, I had not to act in the open. Someone might arrive too soon. So, thoroughly well posted as to the situation of the switches, I extinguished the lamps and dodged in among the Roman stonework to the foot of a great pillar, towering almost to the lofty roof and surmounted by an ornate capital. I had planned all this beforehand, you see, but I must confess it was an awful scramble to the top. I had only just curled up on the summit, the hand of my invaluable leather case held fast in my teeth, when a sergeant came running down the gallery almost into the arms of the constable who was running up the steps from the Etruscan room. A moment's hurried conversation, then the lights turned on, and the sound of a whistle. It was foolish, of course, but I had expected it. From all over the building the police arrived, and fatigued as I was with my climb, yet another acrobatic feat was before me. The top of my pillar was no great distance from the stone balustrade of the first floor landing, on which the Egyptian room opens, and a narrow ledge, perhaps of 11 inches, runs all round the wall of the Roman gallery, some 4 feet below the ceiling. I cautiously stepped from the pillar to the ledge. I was invisible from the other end of the place, and pressing my body close against the wall, reached the balustrade. Before Constable Smith, who had left his post and descended to the lower gallery on hearing the sergeant's whistle, re-entered the Egyptian room, my bright new key had found the lock of a certain cabinet, and I was secure behind a mummy case, whilst a little steel pin prevented the spring of the lock from shutting me in. Poor Constable Smith! I was sorry to have to act so, but 10 minutes after the closing of the doors of communication, I came on him from behind, having silently crept from the case as he passed me, and following him down the darkened room, the thin linen wrappings that covered my feet making no sound upon the wooden floor. I had a pad ready in my hand, saturated with the contents of a small phial that had reposed in my mummy garments. I thrust my knee in his spine, seized his hands by a trick which you may learn for a peseta any day in the purlieus of Tangier. A muscular man, he tried hard to cope with his unseen opponent, but the pad never left his mouth and nostrils, and the few muffled cries that escaped him were luckily unheard. He soon became conscious, and I had to work hard lest the inspector should make his round before I was ready for him. The mummy case had to be lowered onto the floor, and the heavy body tightly bound and lifted into it, then stood up again and securely locked behind the glass doors. It was hot work, and I had but just accomplished the task and climbed into the constable's uniform when the inspector's key sounded in the door. Ah, it is an exciting profession. The rest was easy. Wrapped up in my yellow mummy linen were the various appliances required, and in the leather box was the imitation Rienzi vase. The circular glass top of the case gave some trouble. So hard and thick was it I had to desist 5 times and conceal my tools, owing to the hourly visits of the inspector. Poor Constable Smith began to groan towards 6 o'clock, and a second dose of medicine was necessary to keep him quiet for another hour or so. I filed out with the other policemen in the morning, the Rienzi vase inside my helmet. As to the sequel, it is brief. Of course the detectives tried their hands at the affair, but pooh, I'm too old a bird to leave clues. It's only amateurs that do that. My fee, and the conditions to be observed in paying it, I conveyed to the authorities privately. They thought they had a clue then, and delayed another week. They actually detained my unhappy agent, a most guileless and upright person who knew positively nothing. Oh, it was too funny. But realizing that only by the vase being returned to its place could a scandal be avoided, they met me in the matter. End of The Mysterious Mummy.